What is going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back with another episode of the Sideline Report with the Athletics, Jeff Zrebiec. If you're excited to hear more from our guy, Jay-Z, hit that like button, click subscribe if you're new here so you can find your way back. Jay-Z, my guy, how's it going?
Good, Cole. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I was just telling Jay-Z off stream we're going through the 4-month sleep regression with my youngest, so I'm tired. It's the start of football season, so that's keeping me excited and getting the adrenaline going. But before we get into it here, I want to start because I'm really curious. We're kind of in our first season back from the COVID years, I guess we'll call them, and just interested in your perspective, just because is everything kind of back to normal from your perspective in the facility? Is there still restrictions? Like, what's that kind of vibe like nowadays?
Yeah. No, it is. It is pretty much back to normal. I mean, we have locker room access on Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays, and you know, it's been a couple weeks now. But when I first got in there, it was I couldn't get over how long it had been since I had last been in the Ravens locker room. And I believe it was the week of the first Tennessee playoff game at the end of the 2019 season. I mean, and they, and just there's a lot of guys in that locker room that have never had the media in their locker room, because whether they did the college thing or since they've been in the NFL, it's been the COVID year. So ultimately, I think it's very beneficial for a reporter to be able to be in the locker room and to get to know some guys. I mean, there's when was it? Last week was the first time I had ever spoken to J.K. Dobbins in person. I mean, and this is his third year. I mean, I talked to him over Zooms, and he got hurt obviously, so he wasn't around last year, and he hasn't been available this year. So it was just odd to actually get to talk to the guy in person. But yeah, it's cool. It's always, as I said, it makes your job a little bit easier when you're in the locker room. You get to know people a little bit. You start to build a little more of a rapport with players, and I look forward to that this year. I know you've talked to Kevin Zeitler, and it was funny. I introduced myself to him. I talked to him over over Zoom, and I introduced myself to him. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And he goes, "Yeah, I know who you are. I've seen your face on Twitter." And I mean, that's kind of like what it is nowadays, like, because we haven't been in the locker room, we haven't been in podium sessions with these guys. They've been mostly over Zoom. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear and kind of get that perspective. And I guess the only upside of that is you get to avoid Marlon Humphrey's food takes, so that's always a bit of an advantage. But let's get right into it. Obviously, I mean, I saw the injury report come out today. It's starting to look like the CVS receipt again, which isn't ideal. But I thought we could kind of start there. So, we saw Lamar Jackson in compression sleeve today, and I know he didn't throw. Is there any concern there? Is it minor? No concern for Sunday? What are you thinking there?
Look, I don't want to say it's nothing just because you like your quarterback throwing to his receivers during the practice week. And the way Lamar spoke about it today, it certainly seemed to suggest he's not going to throw until Sunday. Now, he could have just been avoiding the question. You never really know with Lamar. But, he's throwing the heck out of the ball right now. He's in a good groove. Played extremely well the other day, and I thought he finished strong against the Jets, other than the one interception in garbage time. So I think you'd prefer him staying on routine and throwing and doing this and that. But it sounds like it's not going to be the case. But I don't think that's going to be a factor, a major factor in Sunday's game. At least I don't get the sense that they're concerned about it, that they think it's a big deal. I think you'd like him to stay in his routine, but I think they're pretty hopeful that this will just be a blip, and he'll be ready to go Sunday.
Makes sense. And then obviously I saw you mention on Twitter that Ronnie Stanley was kind of doing more. So what did that look like? And is there any sort of anticipation on when we could see him in a live game?
Yeah, he just seemed more involved from the second we were out there today. Practice last week, Friday, he kind of came after all the individual drills started, and he kind of came out there and did a few things, was standing off the side a little bit. In previous weeks, you can tell there's certain things he wasn't doing. And But today, now we're out of there before the team stuff starts. The 11-on-11, all that. So we're out of there before that starts. So I can't tell you our participation level in that. I know, the podium sessions are off to the side of the field at the end of practice. So we see the guys walking off, and I didn't see him. So that suggests that he went in early like he's been doing. So he wasn't out there with the full practice. He's still ramping up. But I honestly like what I saw. He was more involved, and he I've liked what I've seen when he does stuff. And from the very beginning, he doesn't appear to be laboring. He looks in good shape. He's moving well. Now, I'm not saying that means he's ready to block, Von Miller next week or Matthew Judon on Sunday. I'm just saying I think he's on the right track, and I hesitate to say that because I know the skepticism. But I think things are still on the uptick there. And even if it's a couple more weeks, the sense I get is Ronnie's confident when he comes back that he's going to be a very good player. And he was not last year. We saw that in week 1. And we'll see. I don't know that, he's missed so much time. Like, you can't expect him to be an all pro right out of the chute, but it'll be good for him to get back on the field, start working his way back in, and hopefully the progression will just be upward. But, I think today seems like it's another step in the ramp up process. And that's what you look for at this stage. I don't see him playing Sunday. Who knows? I'll monitor that the rest of the week. He's been getting Thursdays off, I believe. We'll see if he's out there tomorrow. But he does look like a player that's getting much closer.
That's good news. That's good news. And I mean, Patrick McCary played quite well in relief, as he normally does, but obviously getting Ronnie back is going to be a difference maker. And then one of the weird things I shouldn't say weird things, but I think something that's been tough for fans to understand is this J.K. Dobbins situation, because there was the back and forth with Ian Rappaport, and he's ramped up to I think he was full participation all last week. So would we get him back this week, or is it still kind of they're playing it safe there?
Yeah, Cole, I that's been kind of a weird thing for me too. Is there some arbitrary date that they've set that this is the day he's going to debut it? Is it like we're going to unveil him against Buffalo and at home, and the place is going to go nuts? I wish I knew more, but being a full participant in practice for 2 straight weeks, you'd think he'd be ready to go Sunday. I don't want to say I'd be surprised if he doesn't play Sunday, but it just seems to be there that that we're heading towards that. It's been odd. They've been very evasive about what's the holdup. I think people are getting on Harbaugh about it. I don't really think this is his call. I think this is above John. But look, I do want to say, J.K. Dobbins would have, if it was up to J.K. Dobbins, he would have been out there the first day of training camp. I mean, it was kind of a scene the first day of training camp with him trying to push his way onto the field in full uniform after he was put on the PUP list earlier in the day. I kid you not. Justin Houston, kind of had to put his arm around him. At one point, Eric DaCosta had to put his arm around him with Steve Bisciotti sitting there. This guy was trying to force his way on the field, and that we didn't see him for a while after that. So, so I think he thinks he's been ready for a while, but I think he understands the team is being cautious with him. But I also want to say he hasn't looked ready early on, Cole. I'm not, the guy is busting his butt. He wants to be out there so much, but you could tell for a while that he just wasn't himself. There's a hitch in his giddy up. He just did not look like he was moving great laterally. And I think each progressive week you've seen him look a little better. And I guess that's what the point is. I don't know if there's one magical thing they want to see or a certain date. They have all the GPS tracking, so they can see how fast he's running in these practices. But he hasn't been, early on, he wasn't close to ready. Not even close. Like, you saw him and you'd be like, wow, I don't know if this is going to happen for him. But each week he's gotten progressively better, and he should be at a point where he's nearing his debut. I'm not positive it's going to be this week, but boy, they could use a jolt in that running game. of all the things this year, there's always things that, take you by surprise, both positives and negatives. Their inability to run the ball and the ball's not in Jackson's hands has taken me by a big surprise.
Yeah, and like we even saw it last year with the backup running backs, or vet running backs coming in, they were still running the ball well.
Yeah.
Even with Foreman and Murray, and I mean I've done 2 film rooms back-to-back weeks on the run game struggles, and it's truly shocking just to kind of see it not be able to get going. And I mean there's plays where sometimes it is the O-line, but there's definitely plays where it's just Kenyon Drake isn't that guy, and Mike Davis isn't that guy. And
I know. You know what, Cole? I thought Freeman played his butt off last year, but there just wasn't a whole lot of juice there. Obviously, I think he got every ounce of ability that he had left. Latavius Murray had that high ankle sprain. He's running really upright for most of the season, and he finally got it going a little bit in the Steelers. But overall, I thought they needed guys with more juice, more upside. But I'm not convinced that any of these guys have more upside on those guys we saw last year. I hate to be negative. I mean, obviously blocking is different, so we shall see. But those guys last year look like they had a little more juice than what we're seeing here. So maybe it's a case of Kenyon Drake where he's just kind of getting a feel for the scheme and all that. I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that mix isn't headed for a shakeup sometime soon. If you watched Harbaugh's press conference Monday, he made it pretty clear they need more from the backs, and he did it while also saying, obviously, we have to block it better. But the running backs were absolutely cited in that. I mean, so it'll be interesting to see who gets the majority of the carries. I mean, if Dobbins doesn't play Sunday, I mean, we could be headed for a heavy Justice Hill game. And this was a guy who 2 years ago, before he got hurt, was kind of cast aside, like he wasn't going to be part of the picture anymore. And who knows, if I had to put money down on it now about who would lead their team carries on Sunday, I'd probably say Justice Hill. But we got a ways to go here, and I think Dobbins' status looms.
Yeah, I think it really explains the Melvin Gordon interest they had in the offseason. I know fans were kind of upset at bringing in another running back, but now we're kind of seeing why, with Dobbins taking a while and Gus Edwards being on a longer track than I think any of us really anticipated.
Yeah.
But and I know people were upset about the one play from Justice Hill where he went to the sideline, but I think people forget there was a minute left in the game. And I think if you watch the way the blockers on the edge set, I think they were trying to. I think he was told to run out of bounds and stop the clock. But I mean, we'll see. He definitely looks, we'll say, the juiciest of the 3 that have been playing. But yeah, we will see. And then obviously, I want to get an update on anything we've heard on Gus Edwards, Tyus Bowser, David Ajabo, basically the pup guys. Do you see them kind of coming back in week 5 when they're off pup, or do you think that's going to be a longer track for those 3?
The guy who's ahead by a wide margin is Tyus. I think there's some people that expected him to be ready for week 1, and he kind of backed off a little bit. Wasn't feeling comfortable, sort of backed off, and thought it would be good for him to get some more weeks in. But he's on the field most days by himself, working with the trainer. Sometimes it's as we're getting out there, sometimes it's as we're leaving. But he's working really hard. He's moving really well. I don't think when he gets back to practice likely after week 4, I don't think there's going to be a huge ramp up required there. I'm not saying he's going to play in week 5 right away, but I don't think he's far away. Edwards seemed like he was doing much better. There wasn't a whole lot of optimism about Edwards a couple months ago. In fact, there was a consideration he may not play at all this year. That's how bad his knee was kind of shredded. There was a lot of concern there. But it seemed like there was some optimism, over the last month or so. I know, you've probably seen Gus's social media posts. But still, I mean, look, even if he's back on the practice field in week 5, he's got some time. He's got to ramp up. I think what people don't understand is, people are questioning, well, why are Stanley and Dobbins, why are they wasting roster spots? Why are they on PUP? Why aren't they on PUP? And these guys need to practice. You just can't get, after a year away or however long is you can't just set foot on the practice field on Wednesday and expect to be in the lineup Sunday. It just doesn't work that way. So that's why they want those guys to practice, and the other guys are going to have to go through that same kind of process. But as I said, I think Bowser would be a little ahead of that because he's been on the field a lot. He looks like he's ready to hit the ground running when he can practice, and perhaps not, be as limited early than some of those other guys are. Ajabu, I think he was always going to be a midseason at best, second half of the season at best guy. Haven't heard a lot about him, haven't seen him around. He probably has his own hours now where he's rehabbing. So I don't really have a definitive update on him other than he's a ways away at he's not in, they're not expecting him to come in week 5 and save the pass rush. I promise you that.
Yeah, I think Harbaugh has said something about November, and that kind of aligned with the timeline. So that all makes sense. And then obviously they brought in Jason Pierre-Paul for a second visit. So, we're almost in a scenario where you and I are going to have to rush the passer here soon, just with like literally the lack of bodies. So do you see that signing getting done? I know they brought in Blake Martinez done. Does it sound like they're out of town and they're moving on to different options, or, what are you kind of anticipating there with JPP and Martinez?
Yeah, it sounds like it's part of the negotiations, and the Ravens wanted to get a look at where they were at physically, JPP is a workout. Blake Martinez was just a visit, so I imagine they did the physical on on Blake Martinez, and JPP, they already took a physical back when he visited in June. The thing about JPP, and I grew up as a huge Giant fan. This job kind of beats the fandom out of you. But there was a time I used to be a huge JPP fan, so I feel like I followed his career legitimate, a good part of his career, and he never was known for giving any discounts. That's for sure. I think so people are saying, well, he has no other offers or whatever. Maybe he does, maybe he's not. Maybe he's saying he has interest just to, you'd think there'd be teams wanting to take a look at him. But, he did not play well last year. I think if you watch the video, I think Pro Football Focus may have had him as one of the worst ranked outside linebackers in the league last year. He had off-season shoulder surgery, so there's something to prove there. I think he's definitely worth the shot, but obviously it's got to be reasonable from a contract perspective. We're at a stage where they should get Bowser back in 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe Ajabu later, but we're getting a little closer to the trade deadline where maybe some outside linebackers also come free. But again, how long can you wait, Cole? I mean, that's the thing. I've used the word curious to describe their outside linebacker strategy, and I go even all the way back in the off season with it. Like they went from.
We talked about it right at the draft. That was your biggest concern, and it was kind of the concern not getting talked about enough was what is the plan at outside linebacker? And it's just now it's kind of rearing its ugly head.
I mean, they went from thinking they had a final deal with Zadarius Smith, and you know what? I've heard a lot of people complain. Well, they should have given him what he wants. I'm over that, man. I mean, they went back to try to make a deal that appeased him. They thought they'd 2 different verbal agreements. He ultimately slept on it and still wanted something else. At some point, you got to move on. I'm sorry. You just can't, if someone either wants to be there or not, they offered him what they felt like was a fair deal. I don't, so whatever. My issue with their handling of it is why not pivot and try to get somebody else? I think all along we expected Justin Houston to probably be back. So I know you kind of had that option in the can. I like the David Ajabu pick, but they had no reservations about him helping them this year, So where was the immediate help? And I guess the plan, you kind of felt like Dalen Hayes would kind of merge here, or at least, he didn't have to be a starting caliber, but as a number 3 or number 4, and that didn't work out. And then his knee started barking again over the summer. And here we are, but I just can't imagine the plan just being, call up, Means from the practice squad. And then when he exhausts the options, maybe it's Fackrell, maybe it's Jeremiah Moon. I mean, we're talking about edge rusher here. And it's just hard to believe. It's just been a curious strategy to begin with. And, even if you get JPP tomorrow, when's he going to be ready to play? Like, when's the last time he's even practiced with the team, So he's going to be a couple weeks away. You just can't sign that guy on a Thursday and think he's going to play on a Sunday. So by now you could sign him now and he'll probably be ready right around when Tyus Bowser is going to be ready. And that, so it's just like, you kind of need immediate help now. And I don't know that Brandon Copeland, who's one of the nicest, best, smartest guys I've ever covered in my career, but I can't imagine that's the plan here. I saw a stat from True Media, who Athletic works with. Justin Houston has had more pass rush snaps the first 2 weeks than any time in his career since 2015. I mean, Justin Houston was 26 in 2015. He's 33 now. I'm not blaming the coaches here. I mean, he's a guy that's playing well. He's a guy that helps you win. In these late in the games, you want him on the field and not Malik Harrison or somebody else. But that's crazy. I mean, how you want this guy productive in week 14, 15 on, and you're playing him that many snaps early. Always playing too many snaps too, probably. Their pass. Another stat was, they through 3 quarters against the Dolphins, I think they got pressure on Tua on 23% of his snaps. And then the fourth quarter, they were under 11%. They were out of gas. The guys were flat out of gas. And, the Dolphins possessed the ball a lot, and Means got hurt on his first play. So they're still sort of limited there, but you just can't keep putting yourself in that situation. I'm just shocked. And I don't know what the plan is there. I'm just so surprised they've let it get to this point. They need a number 4 this week. I guess it's Moon, unless they feel like Copeland can learn the defense. Otherwise, I don't know who else would be the plan.
Yeah, that is something to think about. And it kind of reminds me of the Calais Campbell situation over the last couple of years, where I think ideally you wanted him playing higher leverage downs, but not playing a lot. And just due to some of the injuries they had in the interior, he ended up playing a lot. And that's how it feels with Houston. And you saw him wear down as the season went on. So it feels like, unfortunately, we're heading in that direction. But obviously the theme of this week has been the miscommunications and blown coverages. I'd say it's a haunting from 2021 that I didn't expect to see so early this year, especially with a new defensive coordinator. But, what are your kind of concerns with that? Do you find it concerning to have similar issues under a new defensive coordinator? Does it feel all too similar to when Wink Martindale? Or do you think it's just, we had a bunch of young players playing in big moments against big-time players in Waddle and Tyreek Hill?
I want to be careful here because I don't want to throw a player under the bus and then everybody's going to react. But my concern is Kyle Hamilton. I'm not concerned about it really. I think Marcus Peters, just getting in and out of breaks, you can tell it was a little bit of a struggle. And we at this point, you have to expect that for all these guys coming off injuries. You didn't have Marlon Humphrey out there. When Marlon Humphrey was out there, they looked damn good in the secondary, to be honest. I like Demarion Williams. I think he did some good things. Now that short touchdown, their first one in the fourth quarter, I think it was Craycraft or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Demarion Williams got caught kind of peeking in the backfield and lost his man for a second. And, Tua made a great play to spin out of Broderick Washington and throw him. But, he'll learn to, that he needs to stay with the man rather than get caught looking. But I thought he played a pretty good game, Pepe Williams. Armour Davis had his moments, some good, some bad. I like some things he did. I'm not going to blame that touchdown on him, on Tua. With Tyreek Hill, the 60-yarder. Somebody should have had help. Maybe he could have done some things differently. I think, again, he's a guy to learn, but you're also talking about a 4th-round pick playing against one of the best receivers in football, probably the fastest guy in football. So those guys just need to play. You don't want to have to rely on them for the full game, and maybe you don't want them on the field late in the fourth quarter, but I don't know. I like those 2 guys. I like the 2 young guys. I think Humphrey has played pretty well for these first 2 weeks when he's been playing. I thought Brandon Stevens, who should play Sunday, I spoke to Brandon today, and I asked the question the other day in the press room, Cole, do they win that game if Brandon Stevens is active? Seriously. And here's a guy that I don't think anyone expected to be playing corner there. And I'm asking that question. I don't know. They certainly would have a better chance of closing that game, I think, with Stevens on the field. So, he's still learning. I'm not saying he's all there either. But so I think you get him back this Sunday. But the one that worries me a little is Kyle Hamilton. I think he's fighting it a little bit. I'm not going to use this as a referendum for what kind of career he's had. I'm not going to call him a bust. But I just think he's fighting it, battling some confidence, and he wants badly to make a play, and it's just not there right now. And each missed tackle then, compounds it. He wants to do some good things, and I think for the first half, he made two really nice open field plays, and he was having a decent game by that standard until obviously the coverage blow up. But you saw in that touchdown where Hill ran by Peters, Hamilton knows what he's supposed to do on that. He knows. It's like you can blame it on Mike McDonald all you want. He knows he's got to be the deep guy and can't allow him over his head. He knows that, but he wanted to make a play. He wanted to jump that crosser out in front of him and either make the interception or make a big hit. And he lost his assignment. And that to me is a sign of a guy who is kind of pressing, trying too hard right now. He knows he's gotten criticism. He knows the expectations are on him. So I'll be interested to see his handling, how they handle him going forward. Maybe do they pick their spots a little bit more? He's going to be out there. He's going to be active. He's going to play on special teams. I still think he's going to get some defensive snaps too. But do they try to limit, kind of the matchups a little bit? Maybe mix in Geno Stone a little more. I mean, you have Brandon Stevens likely coming back Sunday. That gives you more options. Maybe Marcus Peters won't be on as strict as a pitch count, or Marlon Humphrey won't sit out most of the fourth quarter. So, who knows whether, when they'll need Kyle Hamilton. I'm not suggesting to bench him any bit, but maybe they pick and choose for a little while he gets his confidence up and, gets more comfortable. You can't use this as a referendum on what he's going to be, but let's face it, he struggled in a big way, and at least in two of those breakdowns, he kind of was front and center.
Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense. I did a video on Monday on them, and I credited him with both, because I'm just the Jalen Armour-Davis. It looked like they were playing cover 6, and he's just the way he plays his coverage. I'm not convinced that he just didn't realize Tyreek Hill can run that fast, and he was playing cloud coverage. So he fully expected a safety over his head. And you kind of, I hate trying to read body language, but I mean, it sure looked to me like everybody was looking at Kyle Hamilton after that play.
Yeah, it sure did. I mean, him and Marcus Williams were having an animated conversation. I don't think a rookie Kyle Hamilton's going to challenge Marcus Williams there. That's what it looked to me too. And I think even the Gesicki touchdown, I don't know exactly, but he was involved in that too in the first half. I know he was behind Chuck Clark too, but I don't know if Hamilton should have stayed with Gesicki. And, you looking back on it, that was kind of a 3rd and long, and they scored there. That
9 in coverage too. They only had 2 guys. They had Madubuike down.
That play hurt.
That play
hurt. So,
well, that was the crazy thing. Of the 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, 3 were on 3rd down, and it was just like it wasn't even that. Like, they were just right there at one play and giving up the big plays on 3rd down, and I mean, especially like
Marcus Williams, Marcus Williams, who's been terrific, picks that ball off in the fourth quarter, and they probably win that game. You know what I mean? But look, it was a terrible loss. I mean, but let's keep it in perspective too. I've read and heard from a lot of people that said probably the worst regular season loss in Ravens history, and I don't even know that I'd put that in the top 3, to be honest with you. I
still remember that London game when we played Jacksonville.
That was just embarrassing. But the Week 17 game where they got knocked out of the playoffs by a 4th and 12 by the Bengals, which was another situation of a young cornerback playing the wrong coverage, if I recall correctly. The extension game, the immaculate extension game for Antonio Brown. I mean, there's several of them. I wouldn't quite but yeah, I know we're a prisoner of the moment here in our society nowadays, and that sure as heck was a bad loss, and I think it's compounded by the fact you got a really tough assignment now going into New England. They have never won there in the regular season, and then you have Josh Allen and Joe Burrow waiting in the wings the next 2 weeks after that. So it's sitting there 2-0 and knowing if you get through that next stretch with 2 wins the next 3. You're in great shape, but now you're not. Now you got to scratch and claw and try to get 2 of these next 3. Whereas if you're 2-0, you could probably afford to win 1 of 3 and still feel pretty good about where you're at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then we'll kind of get a couple offense questions in before we let you go. So I mean, looking at the O-line, I think, and you and I have talked about this a few times, the Ben Powers versus Ben Cleveland situation. And Ben Cleveland really hurt his case this summer. Like, let's be real. He hurt his case by coming into camp, not being able to pass the conditioning test. He hurt his case by not being able to play that 3rd preseason game when you had Isaiah McKenzie and Jimmy Murray playing guard. Do you see them considering that transition to a different left guard? Do you think Ben Powers has kind of earned his spot and he'll kind of stay there barring injury? How are you kind of seeing the left guard situation?
I think it's something to monitor. I don't know if they're ready to make a change there, but I think ultimately they're going to want to see Ben Cleveland. I mean, he's a 3rd-round pick. None of those issues that kind of dogged him, in the summer should still be going on. He's had enough time. He's removed from some of the stuff. He's had plenty of time now. I get they want to see him win that job. They want to see him earn that role. And he's done nothing to earn, in practice. He's missed a lot of time, the whole conditioning thing. And they want to see him play like his size. I mean, Cole, I've been covering football for about 10 years. That dude, when you walk next to him in the locker room, you couldn't feel any more inferior. I mean, all these guys are big. All these guys are big. It's you get used to it after a while, but it's jaw-dropping originally when you're first in an NFL locker room to see how physically massive these guys are. That guy is in a league of his own, man. He is just massive. His shoulders, his neck, so he just looks like he could be such a beast, but just hasn't clicked on the field. It hasn't clicked in practice. He hasn't played, when he's had chances in games, he hasn't played up to his size and been as physical. And, he already has sort of some athletic limitations there and some stiffness there. So he needs to be as physical as possible. I think we'll see him starting at one point this season. I do, but we'll see when they pull the trigger on that move, and he's going to have to force their hands a little bit. He's just going to have to go out and practice and make it so painfully obvious that they need him in the lineup. And until he does this, I think we're going to be having this conversation for a bit. But I do think I heard a coach on Monday that was pissed off after a collapse, but I heard a coach on Monday also who isn't going to have them a whole lot more tolerate a whole lot more of some of the things that are hurting them. And that's the short yardage stuff. And that's the running backs not showing a whole lot. I can't imagine they're going to be that patient. This is a huge season for them, and they can't, you can't let this go too early without kind of trying some different things and kind of falling into a little bit of a rut here. And he's the one move they have along the offensive line. And, I know people are calling for him, maybe sign Osemele. He's kind of doing the workout circuit, but there's a reason why he's not been signed. And I don't know that they're going to get a stud guard on the free agent, on the trade market either. So Ben Cleveland at some point, I think, is going to have to take that job and run with it. But, we'll see. I don't know if they're ready to pull that trigger yet.
Good to know. And then, one of the other guys that, I was shocked about, because I mean, I don't get to see these guys in practice, especially in the summer like you guys do. But when I was looking at him playing in the preseason, like, Nick Boyle looked like he was moving. I mean, he's never been the most athletic guy, but he at least didn't look like he did with the Megatron brace on his knee last year. So I was shocked when we got to week 1 and he was inactive, and then obviously seeing it again and watching, I think PFF had Josh Oliver's had 34 run block opportunities and only run 12 routes, so they're kind of using him as a run blocker, which has been shocking to me. But do you see them making a switch there? Do you see Nick maybe getting in this week? Do you think it's kind of on a longer track that we may see him again?
And they haven't targeted Josh Oliver once either. I mean, he hasn't gotten a single target. They keep telling us how well he's playing, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to trash the guy. I just don't really notice him a whole lot.
I do, unfortunately. All the wrong reasons, but I notice them.
Excuse me. Honestly, this will be an interesting week for Boyle because where they're going back to New England, where this whole career, altering injury happened. But you could tell something was wrong there, Cole. Excuse me. You could tell something was wrong there. And I mean, he was covering a punt in the fourth quarter of the last preseason game. And I'm like, what is going on? And he was playing a lot in the preseason, and he himself said he needed to play. I just think they're concerned with where he's at, whether he has the mobility and the strength at this point and the power to link up and be the effective player and play that role. And all that. I mean, he's clearly running better. He clearly doesn't look as compromised, but that's the only thing. That's the only thing I can think of. He's not on the injury report. He hasn't been for a couple weeks. He's been getting Thursdays off because he's a veteran. He has, major knee issue in the past, and he gets Thursdays off. But, you can't say I think you got to try everything right now. I would even make a running back switch this week. I think I kind of alluded to that earlier. Yeah. I mean, I don't think Tyler Beatty is that between the tackles guy, but who knows? He maybe brings some juice, gets go out there and runs hard and challenges them on the perimeter a little bit. And I would also play Nick Boyle, and I would not be surprised if he's back in there this week and they give him a shot. At some point, he deserves an opportunity to show if he still has it there. If he still can be that guy. I think the questions whether he can be are legitimate. But as I said, Boyle's, that's a tough situation. It sucks because he deserves better. I'm not saying the Ravens are mistreating him. Don't get me wrong. I don't want that to come across, but he deserves kind of an opportunity. And sometimes you just don't know if the body's going to let him get that opportunity. And he keeps working, and he lost weight, put himself in great shape. His knee does look better. He's not hobbling as much, but I think they're a little worried that, maybe the skills have eroded a little bit, as tough as it is to say, and he's just not that guy anymore. And he's not shown he's that guy when he's played in the preseason practice. And I'm just talking from their perspective. I'm not saying that. But I would be interested to see. I mean, at some point, you have to let him play. You can't keep that salary on a healthy scratch list. I mean, Collier could be 2 or 3 weeks away from coming back. And I don't know where he fits, but at some point, you also wonder, look, do you move Ricard to that blocking tight end role and bring up Ben Mason to be the fullback? You have to this offense is not going to get where it wants to be without being able to run the ball better with the backs, not just with Lamar Jackson. You're putting way too much onus on him to carry the run game too. So I think you have to consider all the options, and I wouldn't be surprised if Boyle is one step towards that this Sunday.
No, that sounds good, and agree with everything you said. Well, we'll wrap here. Obviously, I always appreciate your time, as does everyone watching. The openness, the insight it's super helpful for us to hear. And on a positive note, it sounds like I'm going to be in Baltimore in December for that Denver Broncos game, so I'll finally buy you that beer. That
awesome.
I think I owe you a couple now, but
that's okay, man.
No, but thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Cole. Have a great night again. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, everybody out there, you guys be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace out.